Kia ora, Internet.
Hello and welcome to the Sky Bear Games podcast. I'm Claire.
I'm James.
Tonight we have a very special episode for you in which we have an interview with River Brooking, a moderator or admin of the Facebook group
Dungeons and Dragons New Zealand.
Recently there was a big controversy on the page that we wanted to speak to River about in response to a number of mishaps of cultural appropriation on the page. River took it upon himself to craft an essay about a new rule that was being instated
on
in the
behalf of the moderators in the group.
It was an agreed decision between all the admins to institute this new rule saying that cultural appropriation was not acceptable in this group. This post garnered over 300 comments. It was quite...
Some positive and many negative.
Personally, I cried while reading it. It was very intense. And we just felt like we really, really wanted to talk to River about it because he was at the eye of the storm. He was personally responding to a lot of comments because he thought it was very important.
Because it was very important.
Very important to him and very important to a lot of people, including myself, who stayed silent. And there were probably many other people like me who stayed silent just because...
knowing what to say can be hard, and getting involved in that sort of an argument is incredibly hard.
And getting attacked can be very hard. People don't even put themselves in that vulnerable position. And so I really wanted to speak to him just because I really admired how he did put himself out there. So here is our interview with him. Apologies for any weird sounds you might hear in the background. We're recording in a different room today. You might hear bunnies drinking from a water bottle, so...
Our cat was prowling around a lot.
I had to fend her off the keyboard at one point, so you might hear some weird sounds, but hopefully nothing too weird. Hi, River! Really good to talk to you.
Hello!
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, so could you, for the audience's sake, please just introduce who you are and as deep as you want to go, and how you come to be playing D&D, how you come to be moderating a D&D page on Facebook?
The D&D New Zealand page?
Yeah.
Well, hi, I'm River Brooking. I was born in Gisborne. I'm a Māori, Swedish combination of a human being. My father's Ngāti Porou and my mother's Ngā Ariki Kaiputahi, so I've got kind of a little bit of a history with two opposing tribes in kind of our Māori backgrounds. I became an admin in D&D, the D&D New Zealand page, kind of earlier on in the year. They realised that they did need a Māori person to kind of participate in the I don't want to say governing. It's not really a kind of organisation like that, but they realised that they needed Māori input and queer input, so
Nice.
They got me on board after I was quite passionate in a couple of posts that did rear its head in the D&D page regarding cultural appropriation and racism.
Right, so it sounds like this situation has been ramping up for some time now.
It has been.
I mean, if you think about it, it's been ramping up ever since Gary Gygax decided Oriental Adventures was a great name for a book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not personally, James is a bit of a follower of groups and forums and stuff online, but I'm not particularly good for that. So for me and for other people who aren't so familiar with D&D forums and Facebook groups, what sort of things have you seen that concerned you ramping up to this eventual posting of this new rule?
So my first encounter was of somebody had posted homebrew content of a subclass, and it was called the Māori Warrior.
Oh.
And it wasn't called Māori Inspired Warrior, and the person who created it was not from Māori culture.
Wow.
So there was no partnership or participation going into this with Māori individuals. As I'm aware, it was sold quite cheap, a couple of dollars, I believe. It was what I remember from that. But what concerned me was that it was called Māori.
Yeah.
It wasn't Māori inspired. It was called Māori. And so somebody was profiting financially off this piece. And so they were quite proud of it and took it to the D&D page, and there was quite a few people that were a little bit upset with that.
Yeah.
And because I've kind of always been an outspoken individual, I was happy to try and address it, because a couple of people came to me and they're like, hey, have you seen this? I was like, oh, no, I haven't. I'm going to jump on there. But it's quite disheartening seeing the comments for some of these kinds of posts, because...
Yeah. I feel like they're not
thing,
always in good faith.
Yeah, no, like usually the people, like as soon as somebody says, hey, I'm actually upset with like how you're portraying my culture, people are like, it's worse somewhere else is one of the ones that always pops up. It's just like, just because it's worse somewhere else, it doesn't mean that this kind of behavior is okay here.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's something that always irks me. And then a couple of like other comments such as, I don't believe in the concept of cultural appropriation. Or if you can use my culture, my Western culture, then why shouldn't I be able to use yours? But there's obviously it's a really different context, and there's a lot of different history on why we incorporate Western cultures into our everyday lives here in New Zealand as Māori people.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a bad faith argument I see all over the place of, this idea that what Indigenous people have to put up with from Western culture is a cultural exchange rather than
appropriation.
Well, but the other way round of having to fit into
assimilation.
A Western culture is assimilation.
Yeah, there's different ways in which cultures can interact. And
just
I think,
to survive.
To me, the main thing with it is about the relative power of the two cultures. If they approach each other on a relatively level footing, then they are able to exchange ideas without being diminished themselves in the process, or without one exerting power over the other. But when you've got one group that is so much more powerful and one that's so much more marginalised, that's not the same thing. Well, with Māori culture, it's not cultural exchange, it's been cultural assimilation, where Māori culture has been attacked and forcibly, made to be like Western culture and be stamped out. Look at the native schools, for example. And then in exchange, the
heavy quote marks
around that one. You get Māori culture is adapted, but often in a very sort of exoticized, look at this thing that we've found. I'm thinking of the chiefs who got taken back to tour around in Britain and basically put on a show. And that's not exchange. That's clearly appropriative, where one side is forcing their own culture onto the other one and then exhibiting the other one.
So this has been sort of going on for some time. I'm glad that you got put on the mod team for that purpose, although it must be quite exhausting.
Yeah, it's actually really exhausting. I tried to tackle that first ever instance with the Māori Warrior. There's been a couple pop-ups since then, just some like designs and commissions and stuff done by Western white individuals. I'm actually trying to avoid using the term white for the sake of...
I 100% get you.
Absolutely, yeah.
The D&D team and stuff like that, just because a lot of people did show that they were upset about that. But at the end of the day, it is white individuals. And I really don't think that I should, as a Māori man, have to tiptoe around the word white.
I 100%
There's not actually a lot
agree
of negativity associated with the word white in history.
It is literally white supremacy that we're dealing with here.
It is, and it's hard for me to address it as white this and white that without a lot of people getting offended, but it's majoritively white people.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
It is the cultural idea that white culture is better than any other culture, and it's colonialism. It's the root of so much of what we're talking about here. So I get your difficulty with avoiding that word, because I also I find it hard to talk about and avoid that word.
Yeah, and so some of the times I've tried to tackle these sorts of things. Initially, I was not calm and patient about it, because it is something that I find hard to be calm and patient, because it's not presented to me in a calm and patient way.
Exactly.
People aren't
Yes.
being sensitive or respectful when they produce this content. So
Exactly.
sometimes it's hard for me to be polite and, kind in these sorts of manners. I do try to handle it assertively always, and in a way that is, not going to start a giant argument.
Yeah.
But initially I was a little bit angry, and
Fair
I
enough.
wasn't abusive, but I was kind of just like, hey, this is wrong, this is why it's wrong. And one of the initial arguments that I've got, I understand racism because I'm gay.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, that's not synonymous.
No,
That's not the same
exactly.
thing.
Yeah.
Because what about people who are black and gay?
Yeah.
I was just like, it's just an extra layer of sauce to this lasagna. Or an extra spud to this hangi, keeping it on topic.
Yeah, keeping it on theme.
Yeah.
So, sometimes you get arguments that you don't actually expect because sometimes they're just so delusional that you're just like, I don't know how to respond to this.
Not being made in good faith.
Yeah.
But then, other times you get slurs thrown at you.
Yes.
Like, I've shared some of my art because, we do have, some distinct features on Māori and Pacifica women that don't make them look necessarily always as feminine as some of the European women. So I've had, people attack me for my art on how I've portrayed Polynesian women, calling them transgender women in, derogatory ways. And so, it gets exhausting to try and have to be nice to these people and deal with it in a nice way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was before I even became a moderator of the group.
Yeah, so having had that experience, you then decided that you wanted to do this permanently.
Well,
Yeah.
I think you've been handling publicly. You've been handling it very politely and assertively, and I've just been in awe of how
We've
you're not
both
having a
been very
breakdown.
impressed.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I had a huge breakdown.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah.
I had a couple of times, I haven't really cried because of things that have happened on the internet before, but it got to this point where I felt like I wasn't doing enough for my culture.
Oh, yeah, I know that feeling.
Because, I've grown up, and the way that I've grown up was that Māori people, the Māori community, that term was the same as a poor community.
Yes.
So I feel like as a Māori person, a Māori man who has privilege, I feel like I need to be doing something to make the footsteps that I've walked easier for the next little brown boy that walks those same steps.
There's such a nice
So
way of putting it.
I just feel like I've got to do more, to make sure that it's easier for the next person.
Totally.
And so it came to this point where I broke down. I was just like, no, and then I jumped off the internet for a few days.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to look after yourself as well. Oh.
Yeah.
It is quite hard to being the only person of colour on the admin team.
Yes.
And I'm not trying to talk our team down or anything, because there are some amazing white allies in the group itself. But sometimes it's hard to discuss these kinds of topics with them because they don't actually know how it feels to be marginalized and targeted, and they can't really experience this firsthand. So sometimes it's a bit difficult for me to actually bounce my ideas off somebody who's in the position of moderating or has moderated a team, but who is also from a racial minority group.
Yeah, it's a lot of the time you're spending, and I mean, we're even sort of doing it here, you're spending so much time and effort all the time educating other people, and it's always you doing it. So we're super grateful that you're talking to us. Thank you.
Yeah.
Feeling massive imposter syndrome right now as a part Maori person, and just I wasn't able to bring myself to write anything on that post, because I just, like, even without writing anything myself and getting attacked myself, I was in tears just reading it, just, you know, experiencing these things and thinking about my family, and it's really tough.
Yeah.
So I really
Really.
admire you.
Yeah.
It's just like, and even, you know, when you do see these kinds of posts, as Māori people, like before I even had this confidence, I felt a little less inspired, or, you know, I didn't really feel comfortable or safe commenting, hey, this upsets me. Because I've learned as a Māori person growing up that if I say, hey, this is an injustice, I'm going to be fought back like 10 times the power that I posted that comment or like said those words initially.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've kind of just like taught myself to edit, hey, don't say this, don't say that. So, but when that wall breaks, when like enough things have like hit you, it's just like, now I'm going to be like, hey, this is not okay. Like, piss off.
Yeah. So was there sort of like when it sort of really started to hit the fan just before the rule change and everything? Well, okay, I say rule change. Was it sort of in the works that there was going to be some sort of addition to the rules to do with cultural appropriation? Like, what I'm asking is, what was the
circumstances around it?
The feeling of the discussion with the admin team when it came to cultural appropriation?
A artist, I encourage people not to commission this person for Māori designs, because that's what they're doing. They're accepting that.
Wow.
A man named took a commission for it was an art commission for a Māori inspired mimic.
Right.
I saw that.
It was according to the person who commissioned the piece, it was to portray tipua, they were kind of like shapeshifters in Māori mythology. So they wanted to incorporate the idea of tipua and the D&D mimic together. But, however, there was not a lot of partnership that went into creating this piece. The person who commissioned their design made sure that, you know, they got the idea across to as much as they could, but then he posted it, and it wasn't the design that offended people. A couple of actually white people and people who belong to different cultures were like, hey, have you made sure that you've taken proper steps to ensure that you haven't appropriated somebody else's culture? And it was the reaction to that where he started saying, you're a disgusting person.
Whoa.
How dare you? I don't believe in cultural appropriation. I'm an artist. Ha ha ha. So it was kind of just like, okay, this isn't okay. And so we started getting like quite a few people report his comments and his post.
Oh, okay.
And so one of the mods were like, hey, River, do you want to maybe say something on this? So I spent actually from that post and the time between that post and my post was about 3 days.
Right. Wow.
And so I was trying my best to put everything that needed to be said into this post. But obviously I had the initial post was like long.
Yeah.
So I originally wrote 7 pages. And then I managed to cull it down to like just over 4.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's, it was more touching on the commission post, because he started saying all these like, borderline white supremacist like stuff. So it was kind of just like, hard. We actually need to say something about this, and because it was constantly building up, and every time cultural appropriation reared its ugly little head in Dungeons and Dragons NZ, it was never been addressed properly.
I can remember other times where there was art with Māori themes in it, and a lot of the time it was done in a very sort of tokenistic way. In fact, I remember, so for myself, my history involving all of this, I was a completely ignorant, clueless white boy up until the point where I went to teachers' college, where we had to learn the history. And I went, oh, all the stuff I thought I knew was actually wrong, and this is the actual history of what's going on. And then I became really interested in actually finding out as much as I could so that I could teach people correctly as a social studies teacher, actually teaching the Treaty of Waitangi.
I didn't find out till university.
Yeah,
I went all through high school
same.
learning the milquetoast stuff, and then got to uni, just by chance did a Maori studies paper and actually learnt that this was the first time I'd heard the whole thing about the two different versions of the treaty being so wildly different from each other.
Yeah.
And I was actually so shocked that was left out of my teenage education. I couldn't believe it.
When I started actually teaching it, I found that the unit that I was expected to teach didn't have all of this detail in it.
Wow.
And I had to write all these extra lessons and go, hey, we've kind of left out every single thing that happened with the treaty after 1840. Maybe we should put some of this back in. Anyway, though, I became really interested in trying to come up with a role-playing game based on that sort of more accurately models Māori mythology. And I've never gone very far with it because I had terrible thoughts about, this is culturally appropriate, am I the right person to do this? Is it appropriate for me to be putting this together? But I did a fair amount of research, and I remember there was a D&D group where, I think it was a subgroup of the D&D and Z one, where they said, let's actually research and put together a Māori-themed supplement. And all everybody wanted, basically, was to rename Quarterstaff's Taiaha and rename the fighter class Atoa and just leave it at that. That was all they wanted. And I felt really upset. It was a very sort of tokenistic approach.
Yeah, that's a bit...
So,
That's all they wanted to do. They just wanted to reskin things rather than...
stopped commenting in that group very quickly.
They didn't want to actually engage.
Yeah, I do have a friend who decided that they were going to do a friend, I did use that loosely, decided that they were going to create a Māori mythology campaign. And one of my other friends is in this group, or was in this group as a player, and the information that they relayed was absolutely inaccurate. And so I was like, And so they came to my house for board games one day, and so I was just like, I talked about everything in an accurate way, and some of his players were also at the table, so it was a little bit awkward, and I was basically asked to keep quiet in case of spoilers. But now I realise that it wasn't because of spoilers; it was because of inaccuracies, and I was pointing inaccuracies out to the people that thought he was portraying it in a respectful way. But what people don't realise is why I get upset about this a lot, about poor representation and an accurate dissemination of Māori culture, is because sometimes that piece that you put out is somebody's introduction to Māori culture.
Yes. Good point.
So I am quite assertive about it because things need to be accurate, because this is what some people are going to think Māori culture is. And if you're not doing it right, then what they know about Māori culture is incorrect.
Exactly. That's a great point. All right. Do we want to get to the big post itself?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of were leading up to that. I read it all. I read it all several times, actually, because I just really needed to get my head around it. I thought it was very well put together. It
was very cogent. Is that the word I want?
I felt personally...
It was very clear. It was very well structured, very straightforward, very readable.
I felt personally aggrieved at all the people going TLDR, because it was like, you know what? You don't understand. You don't have to live with this every day. So the least you could do is just read it. Just give it the time of day. Just try to understand from someone else's perspective. But there's a lot of people out there who have not really had to see things from other people's perspective because they're in a position of power and, privilege.
Which I think is a great shame for role-playing games, because one of the sort of the great joys and the strengths of role-playing games is putting yourselves in someone else's shoes and imagining what life is like through their eyes. So it should be a wonderful tool for developing empathy and understanding.
So I just want to hear from you whatever you want to say about how the post went down, time frames if you want to talk about, because I see that the post comments went off and then on and then off, and Yeah, it was pretty intense.
It was intense, yeah. So the writing process for me actually did take a few days, and so there was chopping and adding, and then I was running it past other Māori individuals like my friends, my partner as well. But my partner was kind of iffy about having input into it as well because they're white, and so they can't really relate to like a lot of the things that I'm feeling. But I shot a few people, both non-Māori and Māori people, and it's kind of just like, hey, how do you feel about this? Is there anything that you think I could add? Is there any problems that you have with it? And then after all of that screening from my own contacts, I sent it to the admin team.
Right.
And they proofread it to no end. My writing, like, I'm not a writer. I write music. That's what my degree is in, music composition. And so I'm basically an artist. I like to draw with my pen, not really write. But so they went and proofread it, made sure all the punctuation was right, reworded some bits to be more grammatically correct. But so I thought that I was putting in everything that was necessary.
Yes.
There was a lot of stuff there that I still thought was necessary, but it was getting pretty long as it was. So initially I didn't have a too long didn't read section, but then I did make that kind of section with the admin team of Dungeons and Dragons do not support cultural appropriation or racism in any way, shape or form. That was basically it.
Yeah.
So anyone who wanted to read on could absolutely read on and understand why. Why that wasn't accepted, what you can kind of do to avoid cultural appropriation. The fact that cultural exchange was something that, we accepted, respected, and encouraged, but cultural appropriation was not something that we accepted in the group. Yeah. So a lot of people did put in the comments, this is too long, or the structure is completely off. But the problem with that was then they went on to ask 4 other questions that I answered in my novel, my article. So I was like, if it's too long, then why haven't you, why haven't you read it? And then why are you asking me these questions?
Exactly.
It's like, if you had have read it, then it's not actually too long because I'm asking all the things that you wanted to know.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it comes down to this point of you were actually lazy. It's not actually too long.
Yeah,
precisely.
That was what I felt too. It was perfectly clear, straightforward, well structured, well written. It was as long as it needed to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I actually posted this while I was at a dinner party.
Oh boy.
And I went out feeling great. I was about to have cheese fondue. It was all amazing.
That's a good feeling.
We were playing some Monster of the Week, and I didn't win auto, so the night changed quite quickly. Then I posted this, and it started getting quite a lot of attention from people in the group while I was out. And I'm the type of person who reads the comments. I read every single comment, and so people at the party are like, hey, you need to be more engaged with us and play these board games and stuff like this. But I was the only Māori person at this party.
Right.
And so I already felt that I was like alone in the room. But then seeing all of the comments, there will be 10 people that support me, but I also want to change that one person who doesn't. Yeah. Yeah. And so I was trying to educate as much as I could while also making sure that I ate enough fondue. And then it was quite hard because I was getting lots of love, but then there was some people that were just beyond rude. Yeah. Or I don't believe in cultural appropriation. Or are you saying that I can't wear a greenstone or things like that? I'm just like, it's really not what I'm saying here. You've kind of missed the point. Or they'll take half of a sentence that I put in here and twist it up into their own
take it out of context
way. And they're like, you're saying this. I was like, no, that's not what I'm saying. But then the thing that hurt me the most was when people started calling me a fascist and a racist.
Yeah.
They're like, you called us white. I was just like, but you are white. I never applied a negative connotation to that. So if you're taking that in a negative way, that's because you're feeling guilty about something.
Absolutely. Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I love white people. Like my partner white,
Exactly.
my
Yeah.
chosen family are white. I have a lot of non-white people as well, but some of my strongest allies are white people, and I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for white people.
Yeah.
So I don't hate white people. I don't
Exactly.
resent white people. But there's a way to be white that doesn't discourage or put a disadvantage on Māori people.
Exactly. I really liked Rajneel's comment about, all these people who are complaining that you were calling them white, or that why can't we appropriate from Maori culture when, say, people are always appropriating from like French or Italian or Irish culture. Rajneel pointed out that actually it's the white monoculture that calls white people white, and it's the white monoculture that appropriates from Italians, French, Irish, everyone. So like it's a logical fallacy to just attack you for something that's part of the problem that you're trying to point out.
Yeah.
I also really like the argument. Was it in this thread? The one that said most people who are complaining about how this isn't real and they don't get it.
Yes.
If you did a fanfic with Mr. Spock in a Star Wars story, then
The nerd rage would be intense.
people would get it.
Yeah.
And that's just a made-up story,
Yeah.
not actually someone's, culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole argument of, if I shouldn't steal from your culture, why is it fair that you should take from mine? Like, did pop up a couple of times in that actually. But I don't think when I did try to explain it. So one girl did delete her thread after I had explained it, but she ended up attacking me in my messages.
Boy,
wonderful.
fun.
She was just like, if you take from my culture, why can't I take from yours? And I was just like, the history is absolutely different behind that. It's like, when we talk about cultural appropriation, we talk about people of colour, not really white culture.
Exactly.
But when when Māori people embrace white culture, it's not because we want to or we see ours as inferior. It's the fact that we were forced to embrace white culture.
Absolutely.
We were forced to incorporate that into our lives.
Yeah.
Like my grandparents, even my father was whipped in school for speaking te reo.
Yeah, mine too.
And so it's, and the history as well is, that Māori people couldn't even defend themselves in a court in their own tongue. So it's just like, how can we actually defend ourselves if you're not letting us defend ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Ugh.
And so, it's actually been put upon us that we embrace this white culture. I remember, as a child, my mum telling stories about her tribes being attacked for not embracing Christianity.
Right.
Or mixing both Māori religion and Christianity together to make their own religion. And a lot of people don't realise that actually a lot of people were killed because of that.
Yeah.
For not, embracing Christianity into their lives. And so,
Or
it's things like
embracing it the
that.
wrong
It's just
way.
like Māori people didn't go over to Britain and force our culture upon you, murder your people, tell you that you couldn't speak your language and force our language upon you, and actually just wipe out everything you know about your people, and then, reprogram you to be white.
Exactly.
And so when we use white culture, Western culture, it's because that's what we know. That's all we know, and that's not our fault that that's what we know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think just to get a bit personal here for a minute. So I think what people don't realise is how much shame the white monoculture or Western monoculture brings to Indigenous people. So I sort of blame colonialism for my father's death. My father died at age 57 of a pulmonary embolism, but he'd basically given up on himself. He was eating too much, drinking too much, and wouldn't go to the doctor. He checked himself out of hospital after my brother and I checked him into hospital. He just refused help, and I think he just gave up on himself because he had internalized the shame of being brown. He was very ashamed to be Maori. He never lost that. No matter how much he tried to connect with his culture as he grew older. And he was doing great work as a drug and alcohol psychologist, but it still wasn't enough to break through this internalized shame. And I think that's what a lot of people don't get, is that the consequences are very, very real on both a systemic and on a personal level.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually can relate to that myself as well.
Yeah.
My father hasn't really passed away, but it was kind of, my parents divorced at an early age, and my mother lives and breathes Māori culture. My mum is a weaver. She's like a painter. She grows all her food. She lives by the old Māori traditions, whereas my father is internally like racist.
Yeah.
So, but part of me does not blame him for that, because he was literally bashed in like schools for embracing that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Same with my father.
There's a whole traumatic component to this internalized racism that he's got, and it's because he was forced not to incorporate his own culture and live his own culture. So growing up, my dad had custody over us. So I, for 15 years, was not exposed to Māori culture.
Right.
Besides the few songs that we learned in school. And so I grew up embarrassed of being Māori.
Yeah.
My dad sent me to predominantly like white schools. So sometimes I'd be the only brown kid. And so I get bullied like I just get bullied a stupid amount by people because I'm too brown. And then, the couple of times that my mum had custody over me, I was going to these brown schools, and because my dad had kind of reprogrammed us basically to be white, I went to these schools, and then the brown kids were saying, "You're not brown enough."
Oh God, I feel you so much right now. This is my experience too. Yeah.
And I'm just like, if I don't belong at any of these places, where do I belong?
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
It was kind of rough, especially getting into high school. One of the days I got stabbed with a compass before being brown, because I was in one of the higher maths classes.
Right.
And so that, most of the math class were white boys, and, besides the other couple of people that were in there, but I was like, just targeted by people for like no reason. I was getting like chairs thrown at my head, and people were calling me nigger. And I know that word wasn't made for Māori people, but it's used against Māori people. I think I need people to understand that, just because it historically wasn't, used first on Māori people. It is used against us today, and
Absolutely.
it actually does have setbacks for Māori people. And so, it was kind of hard, you're growing up in these kinds of environments, because you learn to absolutely want to disassociate yourself from that part of you. Yeah. And I can't really get rid of my Māori heritage. It's always going to be there. But I started studying and researching and getting into contact with my mum about who I am, where I'm from, where my people are from, and who my people are. And so I started incorporating Māori art form and Māori culture, and trying to do as much research as I possibly can from about 19.
Right.
Maybe 19, 20. So, I'm still new to embracing my culture and research and stuff. I don't know all the answers. I don't expect anyone to know all the answers, because at the end of the day, I am a human, and I think people seeing this, what I'm writing online in such a huge article, I think people didn't really realize that, hey, there's actually a person behind that.
Yes, exactly.
They don't know everything.
Yeah.
And so I think people just well, do you know the answer to this and this part of me? And I was just well, I'll need to research it, but I don't know everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This actually brings up a point that I really wanted to touch on about all the people who sort of said comments along the lines of oh, do I have to call the committee every time I want to write something about a different culture? Now, something I'd like to point out for the audience is that actually in Maoridom, there are cultural ambassadors. There are people on marae and people in museums and people in universities who are their specific job is to be there for people who want to do research. So, like, they
Yeah.
want to be talked to.
Yeah. As a librarian, I know that there's a woman who works at the library down the road, the next library along, and if I've got any questions, I can ask her. She's the expert. That's her job. And she's really lovely and really helpful.
Yeah. And it actually is quite flattering when somebody asks you about your culture.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, for me, as a storyteller as well, I get quite excited when people ask about, like, mythology, because that's, like, something that I love. I'm currently creating, like, my own role-playing game.
Yes!
So it's something that I'm really passionate about and get really excited about, and so I'm more than happy to answer any question that comes at me, as long as it is addressed and presented in a respectful way. Not so I have to do this now. It's just like, you don't really want my answer regardless of whether it's going to agree to you or not. You didn't approach me in a respectful way, so, you know, I don't really want to talk to you. So unless you're, you know, a big butthead, I'm quite happy to try and, you know, explain to you, like, parts of our, like, culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And then people going, oh, but what one person says is good might be, you know, I might publish after having checked with that person, and then this other person comes in and goes, oh, no. I mean, someone raised a really good point about, like, the same thing happens with Crown law. Two different lawyers will say two different things about the law, which is supposed to be held up as, you know, this big rational thing, when really it is just a cultural artifact of English culture.
I mean, I'd say, as a historian, if you're just talking to one person, you're not doing your research. You should check as many sources as you can and talk to as many people as you can. And sure, if you're doing a $1 article for DM's Guild, you might not want to spend 5 years researching, but you can still do your due diligence and head down to the library or head to the marae or talk to someone.
Absolutely. And, you know, even with me creating this cultural appropriation post, I talked about the project that I had, and a tamako artist or kanakawa approached me and was like, hey, if you need help with designs,
awesome.
For, like, you know, moko and carving in my game, I'm really keen to help you out. And that's not my strongest skill. So I was happy to be like, oh yeah, that'd be great. I do know, like, a bit about, like, Māori design and, like, patterns and stuff like that to realize when, hey, this person actually hasn't consulted with Māori people. It was like Callum Best's post for that mimic and the Māori warrior. The Māori warrior, when, you know, they've got mokos and it's just swirls on their face. It's not even korus, it was swirls, and so it's just like, no research went behind this, and then because you've not researched it, I can tell as well that a Māori person didn't help you with this. A Māori person that was, you know, educated to help you with this. So there's no way that you know, did that research, partnered with a Māori person to create this. So, you know, there was no collaboration process. And then you obviously didn't run it past anybody, because anybody would have told you that this isn't Māori design and it's an accurate portrayal of our people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you've got no right to call it Māori, because it's not Māori.
I just find that so bizarre that someone had the gall to do that, but what an interesting world we live in.
Yeah, it's just the fact that it's a non-Māori person making money off of an accurate representation. And it's just like, you know, for things to be respectful, to avoid cultural appropriation, you need to, one, do your research, make sure you are, educating yourself on designs if you're using designs, like te reo if you're going to use the language, like any of our, like, traditions and techniques and stuff like that. If you're using that, make sure you know what you're doing, especially if you plan on having a financial or personal benefit from this. The next thing is, once you've got your idea, once you've done your research, sure, do up some drafts, but make sure that you are collaborating with another Māori person who is maybe experienced in the field or has the same passion, like, about the idea as you, because then if there's Māori partnership and collaboration in this, then you surely will, you know, avoid cultural appropriation. You're actually working with somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're doing it in a respectful way. You're not being lazy about it. If you're not collaborating with somebody, then you're not really doing your best to try to do that.
No.
Because
Yeah.
I didn't know that guy who posted saying, hey, I'm a carver, I'm a Tamilka artist. He popped up because of something that I did. I put myself out there and was just like, hey, I want to talk about this, I want to talk about that. So it's not that hard to find people to do that. And it's the same as, I think Toby Morris was looking for, he was the creative director for the spin-off.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Great.
Artist. And, you know, within seconds, asking for that, because he was just like, hi, I don't actually feel like super comfortable doing like comics for a culture that isn't mine.
Yeah.
Where are the Māori artists? And within seconds, there was a flood of like people come in, and
Nice.
all these Māori artists appear. So if you want to collaborate, it's not that hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are people there.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, it's just all these people like, oh, so I've got to discuss this with the committee? It's just like, you've got to want to be respectful about it, and you've got to want to avoid cultural appropriation.
Exactly.
If you're going in with the mindset that, hey, I can do what I want, you're coming from a place of privilege and you're cultural appropriating.
You're basically being a colonizer if that's your attitude. It's like a colonizer in an intellectual space, but a colonizer nonetheless.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and so like with the Māori designs and stuff like that, it's they're like, oh well, but what about, you know, tourist stores, like souvenir stores that have like Māori tonga and stuff like that. Some of those things are made in mass, and you know, Māori didn't have a say whether or not they got sold in these stores.
Yeah.
It's a stone, and you know, our tonga is in the like under the protection principle of like the treaty. When Māori signed that, they were including their tonga, our pounamu, under our intellectual cultural property.
Yeah.
So when
Second
we signed
principle of the treaty in the Māori version explicitly says taonga is protected.
And so now we live in a society where our government doesn't recognise Māori's cultural and intellectual property as something that deserves to be like upheld or protected. So when we say, hey, you're using our designs, you're using this, those are our traditions and those are our taonga, that's our culture, and it deserves an equal footing in, you know, today's society. But that's not happening. We've got Air New Zealand with our kurus and our patterns on the side of their airplanes, their airplane carriers. We've got tourism advertisements with, you know, our patterns like in them again, and it's usually a white person is benefiting and like both financially and personally off using this. And so it's just like, you know, when we get all up and huffy about the treaty, it's for a good reason, because everything that we saw as our intellectual and cultural property is not protected.
Absolutely.
When we signed something that said that it was. And so, you know, we've got Western cultures like benefiting off the treaty we signed, but nothing from our half is really upheld. So there's quite a lot of upset from the elders of my family when it comes to this kind of thing. But
That's
then,
fair
you know,
enough,
it's
too.
just a lot of people like, well, you should be happy because, you know, if the British didn't colonize you, then, you know, the French would have, like, dealt with you in a way worse way. And I was just like, oh, great, I feel happy now.
Yeah, exactly.
The French weren't
Fixes
interested.
everything.
Yeah. It's just amazing how much people's mentality still boils down to might makes right.
Yeah, exactly.
And to me, it's sort of funny because, like, if you draw something and sell something that uses a design of, say, like Mickey Mouse's head, Disney is going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. So it's not
exactly.
like, it's not like intellectual property isn't something that white people don't understand, or
It's
Western
something
people.
that they
Sorry.
invented.
Yeah.
As like, as, you know, white people, and even as not even a white person, as a Māori man, I could never dream of ripping off the Nike logo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And using that in something that I'm going to personally benefit from or like sell.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so it's just like, you know that that's wrong, why are you not looking at my culture like it's exactly the same thing?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And, while we're talking about protections of, like, art forms and Tonga and stuff like that, it even comes down to things like land. Like our maunga,
Yes.
our maunga and our awa. So our mountains, one of Judith Collins's big things for her campaign was that Māori people need to help white people in order for white people to make sure that Māori people are happy. So we've got to give more so that white people can be happy, and in turn, brown people will be happy because white people are happy. And
So trickle down of
includes
cultural economics.
wanting to drill our sacred maunga.
What the hell?
And so I'm just like, when we
Yes.
talk about the protection of our cultural and intellectual property, when we sign that treaty, our mountains, our art forms, our designs, our techniques, our traditions, our language, our life, that's what we sign for. That's what we sign protection for. All of
Yeah.
those things. Not,
Absolutely.
and we've got a right to be upset about that, because who is to say that what Western cultures deem as intellectual property is the right way? Why is that the only right way to deal with things? Like, oh, well, you can't possibly own a mountain. I was like, that's what we signed for, so maybe we do.
And like literally, if you're rich enough, you can buy a mountain. So
Yeah,
why the heck can't Maori own a
I
mountain?
would say Pākehā ownership laws say very clearly that individuals can own a mountain.
Exactly.
So saying, but you can't, that's just
Ridiculous.
being hypocritical.
Yeah, there's a huge, there's a lot of people who say this is the rational way, but what they actually mean is this is the Western cultural,
This is the
Western
way that I was
European
brought
way.
up
Yeah,
in.
this is the way that I was brought up in. I was told it's the most rational thing, therefore you are stupid or primitive for believing
Anything else.
that a river could have, personal autonomy, or things like that. And it's just like, actually, you're a human being just like me, and we all made our cultural things up in our cultural contexts, and so actually it's just as valid.
I think what people need to understand as well is just because it's done does not mean it's right.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And just because today in New Zealand we don't see Māori, or we don't recognise or support Māori's idea of intellectual cultural property, that does not mean that that's the correct way to go.
Exactly.
I was like, we shouldn't really be cutting down all these native trees and drilling into somebody's like sacred mountain just to get resources.
Absolutely.
Those things, then you're not going to have like an infinite source of this. So once you destroy that mountain, you're just going to leave it
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
and move on. But that's super important to our people. And people come from around the world because they see us as green and they see us as free people. But you've got a whole population of Māori people that are targeted or dismissed.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think the main thing for me that people need to do is just try in good faith.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if, like, I have my cultural heritage that I care about very much, and if people get it wrong, I'm going to be upset. But if somebody tried in good faith and made a mistake and went, oh, whoops, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, I will try better, I would be accepting. But people who refuse to try, who refuse to acknowledge that there is a right way of doing things at all apart from what they want to do, that's not even trying at that point.
Yeah. And so, if the people that did those posts of cultural appropriation in the D&D group were apologetic or wanted to improve on this piece, then that would have been fine. And, that would have been, like, squished right then and then. If they were like, oh, I made a mistake. Is there any way that I can fix this? Hey, is there anyone that could help me or collaborate with me to make this piece?
Simple.
But
yeah.
right after we did I posted what I had to say in that article. I think it was just a couple of days later, this, non-Māori person was just like, hi, I want to create these adventures of, like, Maui in D&D.
Right.
Me and my
Yeah, I
friends are
saw
gonna write
that.
it.
The continuing adventures of Maui, basically.
And it was a white individual that wanted to make money for himself and was not consulting Māori people. It was just like, hey, me and my white friends are going to do this, cool.
Oh, God.
I was just like, that's go you.
Yeah, still don't get it. And I mean, with bad examples like Disney, you know, running around doing whatever they want with world cultures, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then, you know, some people were like, hey, how do you feel about Moana?
Yeah.
And I was just like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't personally know the amount of collaboration and research and, you know, stuff like that they put into that, but there are obviously a lot of inaccuracies and whatnot in that.
I know.
I'm not sure whether
Lin-Manuel Miranda's not Pacifica.
Yeah, they use Lin-Manuel Miranda because they liked his music style, but then I believe, like, they used, I think it was a Tahitian song.
There was a real instance, and it was in Tokelau.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Was,
okay.
I'm not sure if it was 19. It was between 19 and 22 girls burnt in their beds
Oh my
in
god.
a dormitory. Because in Tokelau, the dormitories, they're not co-ed.
Right.
And I believe a lot more resources went into funding the structure for the male dormitory.
Right.
And so the females one, I believe it was like somebody was reading in the night with something, and just the whole place just lit up in flames.
Oh.
And that was Loimata Imaliki.
Right.
And so that was the initial song in Moana that they reflavored. They renamed a couple of things, changed a few words, and labeled it the Innocent Warrior. And it's when Moana's on the beach and she's going and getting these shells from the ocean. So absolutely had no context to what was going on. Like I said, a few words were changed to make it less about what had happened. But the tune and the structure was from Loimata Imaligi by Te Waka.
Right. Wow.
So,
I can believe.
So it's, you know, it's a bit like, and it's kind of just like they've chucked all these Polynesian cultures together, smashed them together, and then spat something out. I was just like, I think you could have done this in a way that incorporated factual things from Māori mythology.
Absolutely.
You know, even in Māori culture, like, Maui was not like that.
Yes.
And,
No.
you know, but it's also down to I don't know how much research they did and what they wanted to incorporate, or, you know, if there was collaboration or whatnot. But, yeah, I kind of was a little bit offended by a couple of things, but I was also really happy that there was some positive exposure. Because usually when we, you know, exposed to Māori culture in mainstream media, it's whether it might be portraying alcoholism, drug abuse, sexual abuse, suicide, even things just like, you know, the prison populations and stuff like that. It's just like, as a young Māori man, it didn't like inspire me like to, you know, embrace my culture.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's like, this is all people say about us on TV. Once we're warriors, they're like, oh, you're Māori. Once we're warriors. Did you watch Brotown? I was just like, there's more to us than that.
Yeah, exactly.
And I do remember a friend of ours who's Pacifica saying that she cried after she saw Moana because of seeing herself represented on screen.
So there's
So,
positive
you know,
and
there was something.
I cry as well.
Yeah.
I back to that thing about in the media. I mean, there was a very specific example of when Taika Waititi is celebrated. He's Kiwi filmmaker Taika Waititi.
Oh, right, yes.
When he does something negative, such as saying that New Zealand is racist, he's Maori filmmaker. Yeah.
There we go.
It's just so blatant.
Yeah, and people think that, hey, you've got like enough positive representation in media. You know, you're having disseminated content of you. There's Anika Moa, there's Taika Waititi and Cliff Curtis.
Yeah.
But, you know, we need to support other Māori artists, and, you know, with the whole things like New Conservative trying to abolish Māori funding for these sorts of projects. It's kind of just like, it sucks because it's just like, we need more than 3 Māori people of like standing in the kind of media and like arts world. So it's kind of just like we need to, you know, put more into creating like accurate representation of our culture and
Yeah.
making sure that some content is getting created. So, yes, we should be happy about some representation, but doesn't mean we should be happy about inaccurate representation. We just
Absolutely.
need a lot more of representation.
Oh, the New Conservatives are just an absolute horror show for anyone who's not a straight white male.
Yeah.
And even then.
As a straight white male, I feel like they're an absolute horror show.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit horrific actually, because I was kind of reading over the policies and stuff like that, and it's basically just like, if you're brown, you'll probably go to prison, and we'll do anything that we can to keep you in there.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay.
awful.
It's like targeting Māori youth and then making sure that when they're adult, everything's fine for them. So it's just kind of just like interesting, like looking at that. It's like, okay. And then, seeing Judith Collins' ideas and stuff like that also was just, it's actually really upsetting. And like on top of just even talking about cultural appropriation in the sense of like Dungeons and Dragons, so all like put on like top of each other is quite exhausting for like Māori individuals.
Absolutely.
And even other individuals. Like, so I understand that we're keeping it like specific to New Zealand, but it's more than Māori that's going through this.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't support like it anywhere, so
Yeah.
people are like, oh, but what about here and here and here? I was just like, yeah, why are you using this as an argument? Because I absolutely agree. Those places
Yes.
all matter.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're just like, I'm white, but what about Irish people? I'm like, Irish people matter as well. Everyone matters, that's the point.
Yes.
Oh.
You should respect their culture too.
Yeah.
Why don't we all respect everyone's culture? That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
They're just like, what about the hard times that, fell upon like Northern Ireland and like...
Yeah, it was awful. And
It was really bad.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, the amount of people that, there was a couple of comments that pretty much got insta-deleted. All lives matter. I was just like,
Oh,
okay. That's
Oh, boy.
great. Some people don't even want to try and discuss, like, anything really civil at all when it comes to this kind of thing. But, yeah, some of them are just absolutely just weird.
Yes.
Sometimes it's not even offensive. It's just like, oh, okay, you did say that. That's...
Okay.
Any examples for our audience?
Oh, yeah, it's just like, it's the same thing with, like, people just being like, oh, what was this? Someone said something about my art piece, and it was really, really weird. They're like, oh, that's just Maui in a skirt was a fun one.
Wow.
I was just like, okay, that's great. I was like, thank you. And even on Reddit, like, I posted when I first did that, there was my bard, the photo that I posted in this.
Oh yeah, I know
It
that.
was attached to the
Yeah.
article. It was my bard that I created in a campaign, and she was
Oh,
Excellent.
the bard with the poi.
yeah.
Yes.
So that
She's
was one,
cool.
actually
Yes,
one of my PC characters, and so
Yeah.
I posted that in
She's
Reddit,
cool.
and I was like, hey, this is my Māori bard. And people were like, that's a man, that's Maui from Moana. The amount of people that said that on Reddit and even in the D&D group when I first initially posted it was just like, oh, okay.
I mean, that's getting into even more things about body shaming and...
Policing women's bodies,
Policing women's
especially women of
bodies
colour.
and-
Like,
Oh.
Yeah. it's
what's
good
feminine
old
and what's
great
not. And,
Oh.
yeah.
We love it.
All
Yeah.
classic chestnuts right there.
I was actually modelled after my mum as well.
Exactly.
So I
She
was just
looks like a real
poor
woman.
mum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She looks like a real person, and like, I mean, this is an unfortunate thing in D&D and other geeky sort of cultures is for
There's sort
just
of
for female bodies.
Reinforced body shapes
yeah.
of like, this is what people
You've
will
got to
look
be
like.
hot to be a female in fantasy.
You have to be an elven white woman with silver hair
Exactly.
and a purple robe with a hood. It's
Yeah.
like, not all of us are that. We
Not
can
at
be
all.
that. And I think a lot of people think, oh, well, Māori. Like, I actually couldn't even get my friends to willingly play in my like Polynesian game for like testing and stuff like that because they didn't see it really fantastical. They're like, there's not really a lot of fantasy there. I was like, my culture has a lot of fantasy and it's
Exactly.
really beautiful. There's actually
There's
so much
so-
there.
I wish we could play this
Yeah,
game so
yeah.
much.
I was just gonna say when we get to the next section of like saying, what are you up to? Like, oh, we really want to help test.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah. I mean, it will have to do it remotely because we live completely miles away from you.
wrong part of the country.
Yeah,
Well,
but
that's cool. Yeah,
we'd be dead keen.
Yeah.
I've been trying my best to sort out different things because I do want to create a role playing game and also want it to be adapted, be able to be adapted for D&D as well.
Yeah. So you're gonna put extra different rule sets with it?
Yeah, I wanted to try and change up the rule sets. I'm kind of brainstorming a few different options at the moment.
Definitely keen to help the mechanical testing because we're very into not D&D as well.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm just excited. I'm it's cool talking about it and people are oh, I respect this. This is great, and it encourages because I've actually got a lot of friends that play all these sort of different role playing games, and I've got a couple of that were that sounds really cool. I'd be into that, but everybody else was just we weren't white 15th century.
Yeah.
I'm just yes, that stuff is beautiful.
But there's all the other stuff out there too.
Yeah, I was me and my partner are both commission artists, and so he does a lot of rendering and stuff for me, and I usually do line work and concept designs and stuff like that, and we usually work together to create pieces and whatnot. So it's actually really good collaboration because he's I initially would like to get into doing some multi designs and things like that, but I know that that's not my place, and I need to collaborate. So we're doing positive collaboration, and so
yay.
It's a pleasure working with him with this stuff too, because he comes up with ideas, and I'm just that's really cool. And so I'm still creating unique things that actually aren't in multi-mythology, but
nice.
I incorporate them in a way that yes, this could fit. That could be that noticeably is something multi or multi-inspired. And I'm being respectful about the designs to make sure that the patterns and components that create this piece are still accurate and will still represent what my unique idea that I'm trying to portray.
Nice.
And it's kind of fun process because he's super into French and Italian Renaissance kind of stuff like that, and so
you don't say.
He's super into all that stuff because I kind of want to do. I'm kind of writing campaigns and stuff for that kind of area, and I'm just hey, Lee, can you make me some art for this? So at the moment he's kind of designing one of my. She's kind of like a princess, but very 17th, 18th century Italian.
Nice.
Awesome.
I'm super keen on that, and but at the moment, I've been trying to put a lot of effort into the Polynesian RPG that I'm kind of trying to run.
Sweet. Well, definitely count us in as testers.
Yeah,
that would be honestly great.
Whatever you need.
Thank you.
And I'm going to have to get in touch with you guys eventually for some art because I make video games. So visual novels, so static art is what I'm looking for. So
nice, yeah.
Just made a note to talk to you in the future about that sort of thing.
Yeah, Lee's just started getting into trying to create basic video games and stuff like that too.
Awesome.
But he's quite extravagant with learning all these different mediums. I'm very much a watercolor, sketch and ink kind of person.
Nice.
I'm trying to get into digital and stuff like that as well, but he can kind of just do everything because art wasn't really something that was encouraged in my household, let alone multi art. So now I'm getting to this point. I'm just I want to be respectful, and I want to, make sure that I don't appropriate my own culture and stuff like that. I want to do research. I want everything to be accurate. And I want to make something fantastical that encourages people to play a Polynesian-based RPG. I want to do it in a fun way and something that's very vibrant, bold, and draws attention because there's not actually a lot of Polynesian content out there for role-playing games.
No, and, it's I did some research on it, and there's basically nothing.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of just I want to be that person to put something out there that is beautiful and that, little brown kids can see themselves in because
Yeah.
I think, like, even watching Moana, even though that wasn't really my culture, and they called Papatūānuku Te Whiti, like, I'm just like, I want to create something that people can actually see themselves in.
Absolutely. Well,
And,
we are
like,
totally going to support you in whatever way we can with that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What is it that you want to see from gamers, players, DMs, and then looking even further into the field from producers, event organizers, and stuff like that? I mean, basically what you've been saying the whole time.
Yeah.
I would like to see Māori artists more present in the role-playing community in general.
Yeah.
I want, I've noticed that a lot of the art that is, typically commissioned, I see a lot of commissioned artists in this kind of genre, but they tend to be, like, mostly white.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff that I've been seeing them do has actually been from, like, another culture or, like coloured people. And so I would like to see collaboration is something that's super important to me. And just the research, and I want to see, like, love go into what people are doing.
Yeah.
I want them to be like, I'm passionate about this, not like, hey, I made this pretty thing. Because there's stories behind what your pretty thing is. And there was blood shed for you to have that pretty thing. I want people to understand, people fought for this pretty thing. And do your research behind this and be respectful. And if somebody comes out and it's just like, this upsets me, take a step back and think, oh, I wonder why this upsets them, and be like, hey, can you tell me why it upsets you, and is there anything that I can do to kind of minimize this feeling that you're having?
Yeah.
And so just the consciousness, like, that, people have feelings. It's a good one, just, like, straight off the bat. Just be, like, considerate about everybody else, especially if this isn't not, like, a culture that you belong to. And if somebody's saying your representation affects me, listen to them. And like, try to do something about it. I'd also like to see Māori culture incorporated into people's games. Polynesian culture, but just other cultures incorporated into people's games in a respectful way as well. I don't see a lot of. I've really heard of a lot of Māori characters like that.
No.
I kind of was just like my first kind of introduction to this to D&D. I played in, like, a few games within, like, my first week. I signed up to a few different games, and it was weird because everybody was a kind of white character. Everyone was Scottish or Irish or had a German accent. And so I was just kind of just like, huh. And then one day I did a Māori accent, and people were just like, oh, okay, that's different. I'm just like... I was like, yes, it's different. I was like, we don't all have to have the same kind of characters, because my first, one of my first Māori D&D characters was halfling, and his name was Tane, and he was a Beastmaster Ranger, and he had a kuni.
Oh, awesome!
Oh.
And so I did, my partner did a 3D sculpture for my mini, and then he was just standing on his pig that was, like, taller than him, and it was great.
That is so awesome.
Oh my gosh, can you send a picture, please? That sounds amazing.
I'll send you, like, the picture of the sculpture.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Really exciting.
Oh my gosh.
That's so cool.
I love kuni. Oh.
And he was wielding a tefa.
Nice.
I wanted to redo it and add, like, some kete baskets on the side of... because he had a bag of holding, but it was a kitty of holding, so he could fit lots of stuff in there. But he didn't really put anything really important in there. It was just like kumara and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I refused to eat, like, a lot of things. But so I would like to see, like, more of that kind of stuff, because I think that's fantasy. I think it's cute. I think it's original. But at the end of the day, it's not all about what I think. So I need to acknowledge that and accept that as well. But
no, I agree with you.
Great to see that.
I feel like so much fantasy draws upon mythology. There's so much which is Norse mythology, Greek mythology, Celtic mythology, and I think Māori mythology is just as rich and detailed and full of magic and monsters and mysteries and wonders, and I feel like it's just massively underappreciated.
Yeah, I think it is, and like there's a way to incorporate the both of them as well. Like, so I'm kind of working on a few different designs. Like, I've created something in one of my games, and they're basically guardians of the night, and they support Hinenui Te Po, who killed herself basically in Māori mythology. The goddess of light became the goddess of night due to suicide, and so. Basically, I've got her contesting the god of death in the underworld for dominion over the souls, and so she's picked a few people that met their untimely death, and so a lot of people like the death caused by grievances, and so I've got these kind of spirits that have kind of altered in ways that depict how they kind of died, plus kind of suicide as well. So I'm trying to be like super respectful about how I tackle this, but it's also something I think is quite original.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think it's respectful, and just don't do your like home campaign with no research and then try and make money off of it. Really, like.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And if you do want to make money from it, make sure you're collaborating with someone like other Māori artists or writers and stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And ensure that they profit from it as well.
Yeah. And I think even for people's home games, I always try to put a little bit of history, whatever's relevant to whatever game I'm running, find out something cool and then put that in. And I feel that enriches any game, and it's easy for people to do. And you learn something, and then you get a better
James,
story.
we know that people don't like reading.
Oh, no.
Because people won't read a 4-page long Facebook post, but they will read the 100-page long textbook that is the player's handbook and the DMG.
Yeah.
TLDR on that, perhaps.
And even like the whole Curse of Strahd stuff as well. Like people are like, and how did you learn about this gothic vampire kind of like era?
Yeah.
And it's just like but I'm hoping that when I create this Polynesian game, that people are going to want to show the same like excitement for those beautiful gothic novels or these cute things like Eberron and
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that I achieve like the kind of same thing. But even I'm trying to like incorporate white elements or Western elements, European elements into my Māori game and stuff like that as well. Which is like even with like the designs of like the gods and stuff like that. So one of like an example for my incorporation was that Hinepu Kohurangi, the goddess of mist. She was really the way that I've kind of flavored her is like 18th, like French Renaissance. So she's got like this bustle made of like ferns, and her like a parasol made from like fern. And so the only way that she can go out in the light is if she's got a like fern parasol, otherwise she dissipates like mist does. And so under that as well, her little children of the mist are running along with her. But I've also tried to incorporate Māori designs and stuff into this traditionally French Renaissance kind of like bustle look. Well, just incorporating our designs and our stories and stuff like that. Because every design has a story behind it, and I just want to make sure that I do Māori pride in that as well, but also incorporate something that also comes from a different background.
I would want to see cosplay of that character. That sounds awesome.
Oh, thanks.
I can just imagine it. Oh.
You volunteering.
My skills aren't that good.
We're just starting to get into a lot of the work and stuff for that, because I want to kickstart it, and
Sweet.
we're just getting like the art and stuff for that ready to go. So like those kinds of things, just like incorporating. You don't even have to fully do like something Māori, but like adding some like Māori aspects into that, making sure you collaboration, research, all the good stuff goes behind it. Like put those in your games, and teach people that it's actually fantastical.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fantasy aspects to the things that we do. Like we literally have like a woman that dissipates into mist.
Yeah.
Like little mist children running around. Like fire fingernails, hello? Like,
Yeah.
That would make a pretty sick spell.
We've got things.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think we'd better leave you there so you can go get your dinner. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
talking
for
to
coming
us.
on and chatting to us.
Thank you too. Sorry that I and ah a lot. So
Oh,
That's
that's
fine.
okay.
I am
We
an
do
hour
too.
all the time.
We do too. It's real. It's
not
real.
really- probably circled around a bit. So
Yeah.
sorry about that as well.
That's
okay.
all good. That's
All
all good.
good.
Yeah, we did too.
Yeah,
It's just been a lovely illuminating conversation. Thank you so much.
it has been. It's been great.
I'm super excited to hear more about your campaign setting.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's actually feels really good to have like positive reinforcement for this kind of thing.
We will be
Even in
shilling. We will be
Yeah.
shilling for you like mad on our
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Whatever you need. If you want playtesters, if you want, us shouting out to our audience of like both people who listen to this.
Yeah.
Um,
Our 2 Patreons.
yeah.
Thank you.
We're very excited about it.
Yeah.
Aw, feelings, all the good feelings.
Yeah.
All right, we better let you go and have that pizza. And thank you so much for taking
Thank
the time
you
out.
very
to talk to
much.
Anytime. Thank you.
us. Right.
Okay.
You have a great night.
You too.
We'll
See
catch
ya.
up with you later.
See ya.
ya.
Bye.
Bye. Right. That was a really enlightening conversation for me. And it was really cool to have such flow with someone I'd never actually met before. I thought that was really fun.
I really would love to play a game with him if
Yeah,
he was ever up here or we were ever down there.
absolutely.
As for my final thought that I want to throw out, yes, it can involve a little bit more work doing these things respectfully and properly, but at the same time, it can really be worth it, and you can create a product that is a game that is much better than it would be otherwise. And as an example, I would like to point to Harlem Unbound from Chaosium, which has won numerous awards and received a lot of positive critical acclaim and also academic acclaim for its portrayal of the Black experience in Harlem in the 1920s and how that intersects with the Cthulhu mythos, which is a book that we're very excited to read, and we don't even like Cthulhu, but it sounds so good. So you can actually don't look at this as a cost or a challenge. Look at this as an opportunity.
Yeah. Often people say what they enjoy about role-playing is looking through another person's eyes, walking in another person's shoes. Make that a reality in terms of doing your research and talking to people from cultures if you want to use cultural elements in your game. Well, I think that's us for this week.
for this week.
Right, let's sign off for the week.
Keep gaming.